Here's the 30-second lesson on what legends know. Never practice nunchucks in a crowded room. Never eat chole before a road trip. Always take your shirt off before you iron it. Don't take a call near a swimming pool. And don't forget, saving is not investing. Legends don't just save, they invest in mutual funds. Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.
We are staying with Syria because that is the biggest story. I know there is a lot happening in Parliament, but we'll come to that in the course of time because that will go on. Syria, however, is the big story because what this has done is this has upended not just the power balance in the Middle East, but also in the entire Islamic world and further the global power balance as well, because as you know, this has greatly weakened Russia, Iran. This has greatly weakened Iran's own axis of resistance, as they used to call it. That is now greatly weakened. So two big powers in the region, Russia being the much bigger power and Iran being the second, have been weakened. A third power has become much stronger, that is Turkey. Now those things we'll talk about in the course of time, not today, because each one of these deserves a full discussion. And I think you should also wait for something that our new colleague now, Swasti Rao, Dr. Swasti Rao, who's just joined in as our consulting editor for international and strategic affairs. She'll be giving you some of this in a discussion with other experts, maybe tomorrow or the day after, very soon. So watch for that as well. What I will confine myself to today is one, first of all, we know what has happened. We know that rebels have taken over Syria, and it's not all the rebel groups. That's a misnomer that Free Syrian Army has taken some, Syrian National Army has taken some, or Syrian Democratic Forces, which is Kurds, they've taken some. Ultimately, it is HTS. It is Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, which has taken over, and that is led by Abu Mohammed Al-Jawlani. He has many other names. I will list them out for you, and also a little bit about his life and his personality as we go along. He is, by his own account, only 42 years old, born in 1982, although some accounts tell you Interpol lists him as having been born in 1975, but he says 1982, and many other accounts also say 1982. So let me first of all give you the larger picture. The larger picture is that the Syrian army folded up just like the Afghan National Army had done when the Taliban came in. It is almost like a country falling in somebody else's hands without a shot being fired. That means everybody had accepted this inevitability, and the marching columns, conquering columns just came in with nothing much to do by way of action. So very few people actually fortunately got killed in the process. This was as peaceful as a military takeover or as a rebel takeover can be. That was the case in the case of Taliban as well. In that case also, those who wanted to escape or those who needed to escape, particularly in the Ghani administration, they were able to escape. Looks like they were given enough time to escape. Something like this has happened here itself. So Assad and some of his key people have escaped. His prime minister hasn't, and we've seen videos of him being frog-marched, etc. However, Iranians have escaped, Russians have escaped. Obviously, they were given safe conduct. Now, what kind of force has come into power in Syria? Syria is a very important country in that part of the world. Because this is the Levant. This is between the Eastern Mediterranean right up to the eastern borders of Turkey and Iran. This is a very important part of strategic real estate. Now, Syria sits there. Syria is also a country that shares borders with Israel, and also, unlike Egypt, shares a border dispute with Israel because Israel occupied Golan Heights, or 70% of the Golan Heights area in 1967 in the Six-Day War. It annexed it unilaterally in 1981, saying it's our territory. And then, equally unilaterally, Donald Trump, the rest of the world, has not recognized it as Israeli territory, but Donald Trump, when he was president, unilaterally also recognized it as Israeli territory. Now, as we know that with this takeover, HTS takeover In Damascus, the Israelis lost no time. They sent their tanks and troops across what might be called the line of control or the border from the Golan Heights area and took the other side of Mount Hermon. Taking the other side of Mount Hermon and the other areas means that they went almost up to the little town of Quneitra and secured these territories. They say they secured these territories because Syrian army had left these and they didn't want the rebels taking over. However, once territory is taken, it's rarely given back. That too in this area, because Golan Heights are very, very vital to Israel's security. So Israel is now doing it, they say, to safeguard, to protect their own security, but I'll be surprised if they come back from what they've taken. That said, who's coming to power? HTS, and what do they want? Now I'm seeing a lot of analysis emerging and I'm reading everything that's coming up because there's just too much to read. It's an overload. It's an overload, and I think that word that The Economist said was the word of the year for 2024, brain rot. That is something that I may be facing right now, just reading up so much on what's happening in Syria, particularly when it comes on a day when India loses everywhere. Our men lose to Australia, our women lose to Australia, and our boys also lost to Bangladesh in Asia Cup, under 19 Asia Cup. So a bad day like that, perfect day for a brain rot. That said, I'm trying to distill a lot of the analysis that's coming out from across the world, from informed circles. Now, one very interesting bit of analysis that's coming up, and you can then see a lot of the Western press now trying to normalize Abu Jawlani. Abu Julani, by the way, his name is not Abu Julani. There are some accounts, I think there's one also in his famous PBS, Public Broadcasting Service interview in 2021, where he said that he was giving up global jihad, etc. There, that interview says that he was actually born Ahmad Hussain, but nobody really knows. Abu Julani, however, is his nom de guerre, or the name people take for fighting. Now, it is generally understood that his grandfather was born in Golan Heights. And so this Jawlani, if you see the American lookout notices for him with $10 billion bounties, those actually describe him as al-Julani, also known as aka al-Julani. So the suggestion is that Jawlani actually comes from Golani, and that's part of that nostalgia as well. That said, what does he want? Now, if you go back to his PBS interview, and from what he's been saying now, he and his people, his group have said that they don't mean any harm to any other country. They are not, this is what they are formally saying. Their bands are saying something else. That they don't mean any harm to any country. They don't mean any harm to any minorities. They just want to hand over Syria to a caretaker government. Now, that is what they are saying. And that is something that's being interpreted by many experts to mean that, like the Taliban took over Afghanistan, took complete power in Afghanistan, imposed their rule, put all the women of Afghanistan in jail. They've now even banned them from being trained as nurses or learning to be doctors. So they've got everything. They've got the money, they've got the military, they've got the women under total subjugation and into sex slavery, right? So maybe that's what does it for these groups. And they figured that this is the realistic target that they can achieve. Take a country, take its military, subjugate its women, take its wealth, and then you are done. Because if you try and do pan-national things, if you try and do global jihad, then you run into global powers. Then you run into the US, then you run into the Western world, or other organized countries which may not be as fragile as Afghanistan was, or as Syria has turned out to be right now. Can you imagine groups like that trying to take on any country with a functional system, even for that matter a country like Pakistan? Functional system, functional professional army. These groups will have a tough time taking jihad to any organized country. That's why when they get a broken country, a failed state, they are happy with it. And that's how the interpretation is that groups like Al-Qaeda and Islamic State, they are losing their oomph. I'm afraid of using the expression sex appeal because people misunderstand it. So it does look like that the ideology of Al-Qaeda, which is a pan-national jihad and fighting on the most powerful establishments in the world, particularly any establishment that is labeled as being run by infidels, right? Infidels can be the Americans, the Western world. At one point, for the Mujahideen, it was the Soviet Union. It can be a Hindu India tomorrow. It can be a Buddhist someplace day after tomorrow, anything like that. So that is the pan-national Islamic jihad mindset. Islamic State is one step ahead of that. Islamic State says that all of the Muslim world should be one country. So they want to formalize the concept of the Ummah in one nation state with one ruler who's like the Caliph. So they want to re-establish the Caliphate, go back to the peak of the Ottoman Empire. Even they have discovered that once they tried that, they ran into global powers. In both cases, they ran into the alliance led by the Americans, including the Western nations, but also including many countries, many strong countries in the Islamic world. And that is what it looks like from this analysis, that a group like HTS has now given up, that they look like they are happy to have what they have, which is a country called Syria, a sovereign country. They are the rulers and masters, so why bother with other countries? However, do leopards change their spots? And that too, after such a big success, we don't know, because many of the bands, as I said, of HTS who are now entering big cities, they are shouting slogans and they are saying, Gaza, don't worry, we'll be coming. Jerusalem, we are coming to liberate you. We will destroy Israel, or that we will liberate Mecca, Kaaba, and we will get there also. So that sentiment is not gone. However, it does look like, or at least it is the belief among many analysts. It can be naive. I will share with you an article from the Wall Street Journal, which basically is talking about the rebranding or relaunching of al-Julani. And we've seen that with Sirajuddin Haqqani, who's also a bounty-carrying terrorist for the Americans, and yet the American establishment, particularly the American liberal establishment, led by the New York Times, has been trying to normalize him. Now for a couple of years, he wrote a long op-ed page article in the New York Times. Even recently, he's featured there as if he's a nice guy. And an image is being built that maybe there are two kinds of Taliban, the really bad guys and the not such bad guys or less bad guys like Haqqani. However, the women in Afghanistan further keep driven into the ground, sort of metaphorically speaking. So are these Western intellectuals therefore making the correct call, or are they again indulging in wishful thinking? That remains a question. Now, if this analysis is right, and there is indeed a decline of global jihadism as being too ambitious and unattainable, that means ISIS and AQ type of organizations do not have a future, at least in the foreseeable times. At the same time, space has opened up for groups which are locally powerful, which work on the principle of give me my land. So it's like give me my land jihadism. Nobody wants to follow one leader. It can be Osama bin Laden, it can be Ayman al-Zawahiri, or it can be Abu Muhammed Al-Zarqawi, or Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, the ISIS chief. So leaders of jihadist groups in countries, in other countries no longer want to follow the orders of a leader based somewhere else on the basis that jihad is common to all countries, that jihad does not respect any national boundaries, that we are establishing a pan-national new utopia. That is something that that idea seems to have weakened right now, or at least that is the thinking. Is it wishful or not? We will know in the course of time. Whether this is wishful thinking or not, we will know in the course of time, because there are lots of people who are skeptical about this. One of them is Brendan Weishart. Brendan Weishart's Twitter handle I am sharing with you. See his tweets, they will run on your screen. Also, he's the author of many books. For example, the shadow of war, Iran's quest for supremacy, very relevant to this area, or how the West lost Ukraine, a disaster of our own making, and his new book that's coming up soon, that is Biohack, China's Bid to Control Life. As you can see from the titles of the books and the tone of his tweets, he's not somebody who particularly wants to believe in any pacifist interpretation of what has happened, because he sees Abu Jawlani as somebody who killed Americans, as an ISIS terrorist, and who should not be normalized now. So there are many voices like that. Now, who exactly is Abu Jawlani? I'm talking a little bit about him because he is now a very important being and he'll be around for some time. Also, never mind the bounty on him, US agencies have not been targeting him since 2018, because in these parts, Americans have played all kinds of games, playing one group against the other, and when they are putting one group against the other, then the group that's batting for them, that group may be banned, may be a terrorist group, but then is not only left unharmed, but is given the fullest support. For example, see this cable which has now been circulating everywhere. I think it was part of WikiLeaks. This is where Jake Sullivan, who in 2011 onwards under Obama administration was head of policy planning group in US State Department, he's written a note to Hillary Clinton, then Secretary of State, saying that Al-Qaeda is on our side. Read his note dated 12th February 2011. It says, and I quote, "See last item, AQ," that is Al-Qaeda, "AQ is on our side in Syria. Otherwise, things have basically turned out as expected." So what this tells you is that by 2011, because ISIS was seen as a threat, and also because Obama at that point was fighting Assad. He wanted Assad out. He was committed to getting Assad out. He had boasted that Assad will be out soon. Because Assad was seen as the much bigger enemy at that point, Al-Qaeda was drafted in support in the fight against Assad. So Americans have played these self-destructive games all the time, and we don't know what might happen in this case. That's the reason we have to watch al-Julani very carefully. Now, al-Julani has had many names, as I had mentioned to you. One, of course, is Abu Muhammed Al-Jawlani. That's the name that the US Lookout Notice uses. The second way to spell his name is Abu Muhammed Al-Jawlani, J as in J for Joker. Then I told you that the PBS interview of 2021, where he said that he was giving up pan-Islamic jihad, there it was said that he was actually born Ahmad Hussain. Now, if I read up on him, and I presume that the accounts that he was born in 1982 in Riyadh, those accounts are true, and his father was working in an oil refinery, and he was brought into Damascus a few years later as a young boy. So irrespective of whether he was born in 1982 or 1975, but the fact is that his boyhood might have been influenced by the fact that 1982-83 is when the senior Assad, that is Hafez al-Assad, Bashar's father and long-serving dictator, he sent his armies about 12 to 15,000 strong to annihilate the Sunni stronghold of Hama. Hama is the city that Jawlani's forces just took on their way to Damascus. Hama, then Homs, then Damascus. The reason he sent his armies there under another of his sons, Rifat Asad, was because Muslim Brotherhood had risen in Hama. Now, Muslim Brotherhood is like the umbrella organization of Sunni Islamists or extreme Sunni Islamists all over the Middle East. In fact, many other Islamist groups all over the world also in a way are extensions of Muslim Brotherhood. We see them in our neighborhood as well. Now, they were rising, and remember, post the Arab Spring 2011, it was Muslim Brotherhood which also took power in Egypt through an election, and the Egyptians very soon figured that that's not the kind of Islam they wanted. So there was a popular disapproval of what that Muslim Brotherhood government was doing in Egypt. In the course of time, actually not in very long time, that government was thrown out and a kind of status quo ante was restored, with a general taking charge and a non-Islamist, Muslim, but a non-Islamist modernizing government taking over. Modernizing, not liberal, not democratic, but that is the order of things in those areas, because if you hold a proper election anywhere, then what will come to power is not something that you might like, which in most cases in Sunni countries will be Muslim Brotherhood. That's the reason, because Muslim Brotherhood represents the Sunni power that the Assad dynasty has been fighting them, and that's the reason Hafiz al-Assad sent his armies to destroy the city of Hama, in which there was an almighty massacre of civilians, anything ranging between 10,000 at the minimum to 40 to 50,000, which was the Muslim Brotherhood estimate. Now, Syria has had such serial tragedies. Hama was destroyed, Homs was destroyed, then Aleppo in 2016 onwards, Aleppo was bombed into rubble by Russian Air Force acting on behalf of the Assad administration. Again, if I read more on al-Julani, looks like he was influenced by the Second Intifada in the Palestinian area. Then 2003, when the Americans and Bush invaded Iraq, he decided to go to Iraq and fight there. And that's when he became a pan-Islamic fighter. And he joined AQI. AQI is Al-Qaeda in Iraq. He joined them and became quite a noted fighter there, and he rose very rapidly in the hierarchy there, because he was seen as among the most effective foreign fighters in Al-Qaeda ranks, and killed a lot of American soldiers, and was very successful in ambushing and killing American soldiers. This carried on. His fame grew in 2013. He was listed, especially designated global terrorist by the Americans. In 2018 is when they put that $10 billion bounty on him. Now, initially he was, because he was in Al-Qaeda and seen as a rising star in Al-Qaeda, he came close to Abu Muhammed Al-Zarqawi, who was the boss man then. Zarqawi was killed in an American airstrike in Hib in Iraq on 7 June 2006, after which looks like the organization was a bit leaderless, at which point a very young al-Julani came to Lebanon. He came to Lebanon, and looks like he worked with a small group there called Jund al-Sham. Sham again is for Levant. Jund al-Sham. He trained with them and trained the group also. Then in 2006, he was arrested by the US Armed Forces or US intelligence. 2 years he was detained in Camp Buka, a prison called Camp Buka. Couldn't have been a nice place. There it looks like his ideologies got hardened, and he came in contact with more doctrinaire Islamists. By 2008, he was released. When he was released, first he joined the Al-Qaeda branch in Syria, and by 2001 founded Jabhat al-Nusra, which was a kind of Al-Qaeda manifestation in Syria. 2011, he joined the Islamists in Syria. That is when the fighting against Assad started, because that is when Arab Spring in Syria had gone wrong, as it had gone wrong everywhere. But in Syria, it also became a state of total civil war, because the existing administration was fighting back. The dictator was fighting back. Why? Because the military stayed loyal to him. In that fight, Julani became a significant character. Then he launched his own organization, Jabhat al-Nusra, which initially was loyal to Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi of ISIS, who Baghdadi sent Julani to Syria to set up a branch of ISIS. Now, 2013, while this is going on, there is also a kind of a power tussle between IS and Al-Qaeda, because IS thinks that, look, it's the same ideology. We follow the same ideology at a higher level, at a more extreme level. So we should represent the real thing. What is Al-Qaeda? 2013, Baghdadi announced the merger of Jabhat al-Nusra with Islamic State with ISIS, which al-Julani rejected. He rejected that and declared support instead to Ayman al-Zawahiri of Al-Qaeda. Zawahiri, as we know, was killed in that drone strike in Kabul in 2022, 31st July 2022. By 2016, he really had no affiliation. And then you can see that something is happening between him and the Americans as well. 2017, he breaks away from Al-Qaeda as well. He fully breaks away from Al-Qaeda. So earlier he broke away from ISIS. Now he's broken away from Al-Qaeda and he formed his own organization, that is Hayat Tahrir al-Sham. This was a coalition. He collected many other groups together, and that is when his normalization started, and that 2021 interview came in. Interview had also come in the wake of something which was seen as a success for al-Julani, because 2020 Assad military in Damascus, with the help of the Russians, both air forces launched a massive assault on Idlib, the town far away, the town in the northwest, which was a kind of stronghold of Jolanis. But they were defeated. They were not able to take over Idlib or destroy Jolani's power. And that further helped establish the legend of Jolani. Now you want to read more about it? I have read a lot of it from a string of tweets that a Pakistani observer, Naveed Awan, put out by translating a BBC article in Urdu. So thank you very much, Naveed Awan. I am sharing his Twitter link also with you. Now, he's the man who's now taken over Syria. Whether he formally takes over or not, that doesn't matter, because this is the power that has Syria now. The important thing to remember again is that once again, given the fact that the nationalism in Syria was weak, as it was in Afghanistan, and the nationalism of the country, first of all, the country was broken and divided on ethnic, sectarian, regional grounds, and also because the ruling government did not have credibility. That's why the army did not stay faithful, and army did not find it worth their while to fight for the regime of the day. Further, just as the Americans did not stay back to help a government they had themselves helped get elected and be in power, be installed in power in Kabul, in this case also, the Iranians and Russians showed no interest in helping fight Assad's battle, their own client's battle. So there are multiple lessons in this. However, whether it also means what I had said to you earlier on, that the pan-Islamic jihad has now lost energy, and these jihadist groups are satisfied to have their own piece of real estate, and whether these jihadist groups are satisfied just to own their own piece of real estate and rule over their own people, that is something that we'll see in the course of time.